responders, and I'm proud to be a part of a government.
I thank the member. The question is that the motion be agreed to, and I call the member for Fisher.
Thanks, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I rise in support of this very important motion, and I welcome the late to the party support from those members opposite, because this funding, when it eventually runs out for Fortem, I'll be going through all of the transcripts and Hansard of those who are getting up and talking about how great Fortem are, and we'll be raising that when the funding rounds come around again, because Fortem are an excellent organisation. And in the last parliament, we funded them not just the $10 million that we put on offer in the March budget, but we had funded them numerous millions of dollars. Now, this is a pet project of mine that I've been working on for more than 6 years. Then Superintendent Neil Reid from the Queensland Ambulance Service, who's a constituent of mine, came and saw me and said, "Andrew, you guys and the feds do so much for our vets. What are you doing for first responders?" And my initial response was, well, you know, the first responders are the responsibility of the states and territories. We look after the defence, the ADF. But I thought, that's not good enough, because our first responders are our men and women in uniform back home. We provide $11.5 billion through Department of Veterans Affairs to our veterans, and so we should. But our first responders, who the reality is see so much carnage on our roads, in our homes, floods, fires, you name it. And the sad reality is they do not get looked after properly by the states and territory governments. And enter Fortem. Now, Fortem was the brainchild of John Bale, who started Soldier On. Had a lot to do with John when he was with Soldier On. And he and I got together, and I tried to get funding for Fortem through various ministers when we were in government. And I want to give a shout out to the member for Maranoa, who was the first federal minister who provided funding to Fortem. And he understood the importance of providing mental health care to our frontline first responders here in Australia. And whilst technically it is not the responsibility of the federal government, morally it is. I'm not going to stand here and get into an argument about jurisdiction, constitutional jurisdictions, particularly when the states are not, and territory governments are not pulling their weight, when they are not looking after the mental health of our first responders, then sadly we needed to step in. Now, this last round of funding in March, we provided $10 million to Fortem, and I was extremely disappointed when the Labor government, the now Labor government, did not carry that through. Now, Fortem had already received $2 million, or the promise of $2 million, but they had had $8 million cut from their budget by this Labor government. I and a member for McPherson and every other coalition member who has served in uniform as a first responder stood up at a press conference and said, we will not let this stand. In fact, I spoke with the minister personally, and I said, Minister, we have got to change this. We've got to make sure that the funding flows through to our first responders. I was given not a lot of hope, but with the help of the media and the coalition members, we effectively forced the Prime Minister's hand on this. I'm very pleased that the Prime Minister changed his view. He changed his mind about providing the additional $8 million. I thank him for it. We didn't want to make this a political issue, because this is above politics, just as at the service of our veterans is. But the Fortem organisation provide tremendous services. I've had them to a round table, in fact not a round table, a whole seminar in my electorate where I invited all my emergency service responders to come along. They're a great organisation. They care for not just the mental health of first responders, but also for their families. that go through so much trauma, almost as much as the first responders themselves. I'm very pleased the government has turned around on this point, and I thank them for it.